Labor strikes. In today's world, this is a normal phenomena, happening every day across the world. But this led me to question, where did they originate from? And when or what was the first strike ever recorded in history? The event in question predates the widespread unrest caused by the French Revolution in 1789, the famous peasant revolts all across England in 1381, and even the assassination of the Roman dictator Julius Caesar. The first ever strike occurred back in the 12th century BC in the ancient civilization of Egypt. We know about this strike in particular because the Egyptians were very particular about record keeping and putting everything to pen. They made inscriptions on stone stela and papyri, scrolls that could reach hundreds of feet in length. In these inscriptions, they have recorded days, months, and years of all the important events. They also recorded such details as imperial monetary grants, royal visits, interactions with provinces, correspondences with foreign governments, exported items, imported goods, famines, droughts, wars, ship designs, ship logs, images of royal gifts, pictures of foreign heads of states, drawings of animals, and thankfully for us, labor unrests. Troubles began in 1159 BC with laborers and artisans working on the burial chambers of Ramses III in the Valley of the Kings. But in order to fully understand the situation, we need to jump back a few years and dive into the history of Egypt's war with the Sea People. The origins of the Sea People are unknown, but theories point to their likely starting point being somewhere between Western Asia Minor, Mediterranean islands, or even Southern Europe. They're mainly known for terrorizing many coastal civilizations searching for new land and riches. Countries like Syria, Cyprus, and Egypt toward the end of the Bronze Age had to be on constant watch for these invaders. The Sea People had first attacked Egypt during the reign of Ramses II starting in 1279 BC and again in 1213 BC. Egypt successfully defended its land on both occasions, but when Ramses III took power in 1886 BC, the invasions were more extensive and the safety of the country was threatened. Since he expected the oncoming attacks, he pursued an aggressive policy of drafting more men in his army, building more ships, and diverting greater state resources for fortifications. The defensive measures taken by the pharaoh served Egypt well as the Egyptians finally triumphed. Egyptians massacred the Sea People, captured them, and forced them to serve in the army or work as slaves. But this war proved very expensive for Ramses III. He had stretched the government's resources, and now the royal coffers were empty. Not only was the money situation tight, there was a significant reduction in the number of workers. There were fewer merchants, farmers, and people available for labor because of the casualties of war. By 1159 BC, Egypt was dealing with a full-blown labor scarcity, a revenue crisis, and rampant corruption. All the chaos was unfortunate timing for Ramses as he was approaching a significant moment in his rule. He was 3 years away from completing 30 years at the helm, a significant milestone in Egyptian rule. As such, the pharaoh wanted a lavish party to commemorate his 3 decades in power. But as it turns out, it was a mistake to try and hold an event like this in an economic downturn. Although slaves were carrying out much of the work on the ancient Egyptian sculptures for the party, many paid builders and craftsmen were brought in to make up the workforce. After they had started in 1159 BC, problems started to begin. The first notable problem was with their paycheck, which came in a month late. They went to the officials to complain, who arranged a temporary food release for the employees. But this unfortunately did not resolve unpaid salaries. The inability to pay their workers proved not to be an isolated incident. On 2 additional occasions, the officials neglected to pay the workers what they were owed, and after the 3rd time, the workers waited for 18 more days before their payday. After this, they decided it was time to call it quits. They left behind their tools as they marched towards the temple of Ramses III and chanted, "We are hungry." The laborers proceeded to the temple of Thutmose III and sat in protest of their non-payment of salaries. Egyptian authorities were taken aback. Such a situation had never occurred in Egypt's history, as Egyptian employees were well compensated when most of the work was being done by slaves across the world. As the protests intensified, the workers broke into the main granary. and the employees demanded to speak with officials. Montumes, the head of the police, was summoned. He tried to persuade the workers to leave, but he was powerless. After brief negotiations, the workers again were left unsatisfied and then resorted to more drastic measures. The next day, they barricaded the Valley of the Kings, which housed the tombs of Egyptian rulers. By doing so, they assured that no priests or family members of the deceased could visit the holy spot. The officials threatened the employees with physical violence, but the employees vowed to damage the tombs in retribution. Both parties were at a standstill, and the rulers had no choice but to compensate them. The authorities paid their debts, but again would fault on their payments only a few months later. The vicious cycle of protests and non-payments of wages continued on. The on and off again strikes lasted for 3 years until the pharaoh's festivities in 1156 BC. After the celebrations, there was some sort of resolution between the officials and the laborers, although it's unclear how the final stages of the negotiations unfolded. And thus we close the book on the first ever strike recorded in history. Thank you for watching today's video, and hopefully we will see you in the next one.